1 Samuel chapter 17, Holman Christian Standard Bible. The Philistines gathered their forces for war at Succoth in Judah and encamped between Succoth and Azekah in Ephes Dammim. Saul and the men of Israel gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah. And then they lined up in battle formation to face the Philistines. The Philistines were standing on one hill, and the Israelites were standing on another hill with a ravine between them. Then a champion named Goliath from Gath came out from the Philistine camp. He was 9 feet 9 inches tall and wore a bronze helmet and a bronze scale armor that weighed 125 pounds. There was bronze armor on his shins and a bronze sword that was slung between his shoulders. His spear shaft was like a weaver's beam, and the iron point of his spear weighed 15 pounds. In addition, a shield bearer was walking in front of him. He stood up and shouted to the Israelite battle formations, "Why do you come out to line up in battle formation?" He asked them, "Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose one of your men and have him come down against me. If he wins in a fight against me and kills me, we will be your servants. But if I win against him and kill him, then you will be our servants and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "I defy the ranks of Israel today. Send me a man so we can fight each other." When Saul and all Israel heard these words from the Philistine, they lost their courage and were terrified. Now David was the son of the Ephrathite from Bethlehem of Judah named Jesse. Jesse had 8 sons, and during Saul's reign was already an old man. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war, and their names were Eliab the firstborn, Abinadab the next, and Shammah the third. And David was the youngest. The 3 oldest had followed Saul, but David kept going back and forth from Saul to tend his father's flock in Bethlehem. Every morning and evening for 40 days, the Philistine came forward and took his stand. One day, Jesse had told his son David, "Take this half bushel of roasted grain along with these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Also, take these 10 portions of cheese to the field commander. Check on the welfare of your brothers and bring a confirmation from them. There with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting the Philistines." So David got up early in the morning, left the flock with someone to keep it, loaded up, and set out as soon as Jesse had instructed him. He arrived at the perimeter of the camp as the army was marching out to its battle formation and shouting their battle cry. Israel and the Philistines lined up in battle formation facing each other. David left his supplies in the care of the quartermaster and ran to the battle line. When he arrived, he asked his brothers how they were. When he was speaking with them, suddenly the champion named Goliath, the Philistine from Gath, came forward from the Philistine battle line and shouted his usual words, which David heard. When all the Israelites men saw Goliath, they retreated from him terrified. Previously, an Israelite man had declared, "Do you see this man who keeps coming out? He comes to defy Israel. The king will make this man who kills him very rich and will give him his daughter. The king will also make him household of that man's father exempt from paying taxes in Israel." David spoke to the man who were standing with him. "What will be done for the man who kills that Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Just who is this uncircumcised Philistine? He should defy the armies of the living God." The people told him about the offer, concluding, "This is what to be done for the man who kills him." David's oldest brother Eliab listened as he spoke to the men and became angry with him. "Why did you come down here?" he asked. "Why didn't you leave those few sheep? Who did you leave those few sheep with in the wilderness? I know your arrogance and your evil heart. You came down to see the battle." "What have I done now?" protested David. "It was just a question." Then he turned from those beside him to the others in front of him and asked about the offer. The people gave him the same answer as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, so he had David brought to him. David said to Saul, "Don't let anyone be discouraged by him. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." But Saul said, "You can't go fight this Philistine. You're just a youth, and he's been a warrior since he was young." David answered Saul, "Your servant has been tending his father's sheep. Whenever a lion or a bear came and carried off a lamb from the flock, I went after it, struck it down, and rescued the lamb from its mouth. If it reared up against me, I would grab it by its fur, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed lions and bears. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God." Then David said, "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." Then Saul had his own military clothes put on David. He wore a bronze helmet on David's head and had him put on armor. David strapped his sword over the military clothes and tried to walk, but he was not used to them. "I can't walk in these," David said to Saul. "I'm not used to these." So David took them off. Instead, he took a staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the wadi and put them in the pouch in the shepherd's bag. Then, with his sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. The Philistine came closer and closer to David, with his shield bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he despised him because he was just a youth, healthy and handsome. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come out with me against sticks? Did you come out against me with sticks?" Then he cursed David by his gods. "Come here," the Philistine called to David, "and I'll give you your flesh to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with a dagger, spear, and a sword, but I come against you with the name in the name of Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel's armies. You have defied him. Today, the Lord will hand you over to me. Today, I'll strike you down, cut off your head, and give the corpses of the Philistine camp to the birds of the sky and the creatures of the earth. Then all the world will know that Israel has a God, and this whole assembly will know that it's not by a sword or by spear that the Lord lives, for the battle is the Lord's. He will hand you over to us." When the Philistines started forward to attack him, David ran quickly to the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, slung it, and hit the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell onto his face to the ground. David defeated the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Even though David had no sword, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He grabbed the Philistine's sword, pulled it from its sheath, and used it to kill him. Then he cut off his head. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they ran. The men of Israel and Judah rallied, shouting the battle cry, and chased the Philistines to the entrance of the valley of and to the gates of Ekron. Philistine bodies were strewn all along the Sharim road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from the pursuit of the Philistines, they plundered their camps. David took Goliath's head and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put Goliath's weapons in his own tent. When Saul had seen David going out to confront the Philistine, he asked Abner, the commander of the army, "Whose son is this youth, Abner?" "My king, as surely as you live, I do not know." The king said, "Find out whose son this young man is." When David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the Philistine's head still in his hand. Saul said to him, "Whose son are you, young man?" The son of your servant David, the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem," David answered.